Hello and welcome to another episode of Halftime Cuppa's Coaching Club podcast. And today we are back with part two of our fantastic interview with Akay Mustafa about his coaching journey. It's really worth a listen, certainly if you've heard the first part. If you haven't already, you can of course catch up on that first part and any of our previous coaching podcast episodes just by searching on Spotify, on iTunes, on YouTube, and on our website as well. Just by typing Halftime Cuppa and Coaches Club podcast, it should come up straight away for you. So without further ado, the first voice you're going to hear is Akay Mustafa, and he is just going to carry on where the previous podcast left off. And he's going to talk about his exciting move to Singapore and the rest of his coaching journey. So enjoy.
I was offered a job in Singapore, and here's the not poetic piece, but I guess it's almost like a film. But I kind of knew I was going just before the final, because as I mentioned earlier, I've not really applied for jobs. You get approached, you get asked to move over, and rumblings were coming from Singapore, and then I got a phone call saying that the role had been created and that I'd been invited to apply. So in my heart of hearts, I knew that if I put the application in, I'm going to be interviewed, I'm probably going to get it. So I kind of knew I was leaving. So we play the final, we lose. I'm like, no, I can't believe I'm going to leave on a defeat. Like in my whole coaching career, it's like, to leave on a defeat, it's gonna hurt a bit. But yeah, so I was getting ready for Singapore, and they wanted me to be assistant athletic director and director of football there, because they had a huge program from under 9s to under 18s. So I was very excited, and obviously with my Norwich background and with sort of the Wingate and Finch piece and the Charlton piece, they really wanted to empower me to do that. So I was very excited to get over there and do that.
What was the culture like? Was it a big sort of cultural difference going from a school in London to a school in Singapore?
Huge difference, mainly because in the UK there's a very strong British football culture, for example. So if we're going to talk just about football, and that penetrates every aspect of what you do, because the coaches that you hire that are local will bring that with them. The teams you play against, the leagues that you join, the tournaments that you attend will have that feeling of British football or European football, however you want to classify it. And when you go to Singapore, that's not there. And you can feel the influence of the individual coaches who are all from around the world. So we had the Real Madrid Foundation operating from our campus in Singapore, and they sent actual academy coaches from Real Madrid to do internships there as they developed for the academy. So we had some ex-pros. We had Roberto Carlos came to visit once.
Wow.
Orientes came to visit. So, but you could really feel the Spanish influence on our school. But then another school had the Bayern Munich Academy, and you could feel the German influence there, right? So in Singapore, it was whichever culture they imported, it became evident, because Singaporean football culture wasn't strong enough to penetrate. So it was a very different experience. Again, I learned so much from those coaches. Their attention to detail and the way that they plan seasons, we can learn a lot from. They are definitely far more academic when it comes to coaching. I spoke to them about their coach education, the things that they did and the things that I did, and they laughed at me and they were like, "That's not a course." I'm like, "Yeah, it wasn't a course." And what they did, and they created a curriculum for us from under 8s to under 18s, and I was, as a director for, I was sort of overseeing the groups that were building that. And at times I was saying, you know what, you know better than me. I think you're going to have to take this decision, because they're true sort of students of football.
That's incredible. And some of those names as well, that must have been a fantastic experience.
I lost it. When I saw Roberto Carlos, because I'm a Fenerbahce fan as well, the team in Turkey, and he was one of the stars when we got to the Champions League. I think it was semi-finals or quarter-finals. I can't remember now. I think semi-finals. And obviously he's Roberto Carlos, and I was a left back growing up. So there's Roberto Carlos and there was Paolo Maldini. Like they were the guys, right? And this guy shows up, and by the way, his legs are huge. His thighs are absolutely massive. And he walked in, and I was like, oh my God, he's still got that that aura around him, and he started to play a little bit with the kids, and he was really nice with everyone. And I asked him a little bit about Turkish football, and he got my translated responses. He was just a nice guy, although he was a bit jet lagged, and he had to leave. He felt really faint having played in the 32-degree heat. And then he couldn't hang around for the autographs. He apologized, and he's like, "Look, you guys got to get me home." He's like, "I'm jet lagged. The sun's hit me."
Oh no! Did he do a free kick?
No, we were scared because we had under-8s out there as well. But actually, that year, my under-14s won the Singapore Schools Championship. So he presented us with our medals, which was fantastic.
Oh wow, that must be nice.
Yeah, we all got medals from. So that's great.
So how long was you out there for?
2 years there as under-18, under-14s, and under-11s coach, as well as director of football and assistant athletic director.
So you had quite a lot to juggle.
Yeah, I was working 12 hours a day. I was doing morning training sessions at 7, and then doing my job from 8 till 3, and then coaching from 3 till 6:30. So it was long days, but enjoyable, very enjoyable.
What was the attendance like for the morning sessions? Did you get many there?
Yeah, and I tell you what, the morning sessions, because our facility was on campus, so they would show up, they would play, and they would go to class. But I was paranoid about the heat. I was just worried that I was going to hurt someone. So I never had them do any kind of interval training or anything. And they were like, and I remember saying to one of the other coaches, I think they really need to like build their fitness up, but I don't know what to do under this heat. And I kept giving them water breaks all the time, which really disrupted the session. And one of the coaches said to me, "They're fine. They've been here for years. They've acclimatized. It's just you that's suffering." Once I realized that, I was like, okay. Because we played our first match, and I was worried about the fullbacks. I was like, should I tell him to attack, or should I just tell him to stay so I don't get a heat stroke? And they were fine. They all sprinted for the whole match, and it was just me that was sweating buckets on the side, struggling with the heat.
I think it must be a British sort of environment. You've gone from the temperature here to the temperature out there. You're not quite acclimatized, are we?
Definitely not. And people are like, "Oh, but you're Cypriot, you know." I'm like, "Yeah, I am, but I don't see the sun as often as other Cypriots." And with that team that I was playing for growing up, we actually went to Cyprus on tour to play against other teams. And I remember stepping out onto the pitch. I think it was June. Yeah, our season had ended, and we'd flown over in June. We were going to play 3 games in, I think it was a week. I stepped onto the pitch for game 1, and after 10 minutes, zero strength in my body. I signaled to come off because the sun was just too much, and the coach is just shaking his arm like, "I'm so sorry. I need to sit down. I need water."
Please tell me it was roll-on, roll-off subs.
No, it wasn't. I cost us.
It wasn't. Oh no.
I couldn't play. My head was dizzy, my legs had gone, and apparently everyone was feeling that as well. And I was just fortunate enough to be the first one to raise my hand, because then as soon as I went off, the others are like, "Whoa, I need to go off!" Like, leave him on. Because we're used to playing here, where it's never going to be more than 16, 17 during the season. And we went there where I think it was just over 30 degrees and hot. It was dry heat as well. It was
Not nice.
I built for that.
So, Singapore, you've done 2 years there. What's your next steps from there? Where do you go?
So after Singapore, I got offered an opportunity back at ASL, back to my school. And
how did that come about?
Lots of different things were happening at once, actually. So I had started to apply for jobs while I was at Singapore, because there'd been a change of leadership at the school, and I wasn't comfortable with the direction we were going in. I felt a little bit compromised, so I started to have a look around, and I didn't sign my contract extension when they asked. And I rang up the athletic director at ASL, and I asked if I could get a reference for my recruitment portal, and he was like, "Oh, hold on a minute. Our middle school AD might be leaving. Would you apply for that?" And I said, "Yeah, of course." And at the time, my girlfriend was based in London as well, and I thought this could kill many birds with one stone. And at the same time, the varsity position at ASL had come up, because the coaches were one had left to go to Canada, and the other one had built their own coaching business, so we're stepping away. So I just thought, oh God, this could be perfect. And I interviewed with a school in Hong Kong and one in Indonesia. And I didn't have a good feeling. They weren't great interviews. I just felt uncomfortable in both of them. And then I had my interview at ASL and it went really well. I just thought, you know what, I obviously it's time for me to come back to London. And then thankfully they offered the role and yeah, I came back.
Did it feel weird coming back?
It felt like if you've ever like spent the night away from your parents and then your parents come to pick you up, and as much as you want to stay where you are, you're kind of happy they're back. This kind of strange sort of feeling like that, because a lot of the guys that we'd had that semi-final game with, they were like kids that I'd coached since they were little, since they were in grade 7, and now they were seniors and they were getting ready to leave the school. They'd won it the year before, and a lot of them had messaged me going, "Oh, we missed you, and we dedicate this," and I was really emotional. And in fact, they kind of made me cry when they sent me some of that stuff. I was a bit of a emotional mess, because these were bonds that were beyond football, you know. Like I said, 2 of them I'd been sort of coaching them privately and supporting them and helping them find colleges and really been investing in their lives, not just in football. So it meant a lot to me. And the fact that I came back and we got to have one last tournament together, like I'm getting a bit emotional now talking about it, but it meant a lot to me. It was huge. And they one of them wrote me a letter just before the tournament, which also ruined me. Took me a while ago, sort of. Went to pieces. I'm losing my composure now as well. But so all of that, it was that type of excitement. It's like my Asian adventure was great, and I wouldn't have minded staying a bit longer out there. But I was also ready to come home, you know.
Yeah, and the timing was as you say, spot on.
God, it was perfect.
It all just sort of aligned. I know I've asked sort of away from recordings and other talks about stepping into that environment where they're just won and coming back, like whether you faced any challenges. But if I remember correct, it was because you already had reputation banked up with them and that those past experiences, it was kind of seamless.
Well, might have appeared that way, but I think it's important to acknowledge that even though a lot of them, when they were in middle school, I was quite active in watching them and supporting them, and then they stepped up to the high school program and they were at various levels. So some were playing JJV, some were playing JV, and some were with me in the varsity before I left. But there was only 4 of them that really felt connected to me, right? So the others had enjoyed huge success with the previous coach. That was a coach that brought a lot of them into the varsity team. That was a coach that in the first season got the bronze medal. That was a coach that in the second season won it. So as much as they kind of respected me because of the 4 that did know me and because they respected them, I still had to win them over. And I felt it in the first few weeks because like the formation, for example, was a great one for me because they were playing a diamond, a 4-4-2 diamond, because they had great midfield players and they wanted to get more on the pitch. And the season before they had a great 10, and that 10 was running the show, but he'd graduated. And when I came in, I realized that they were a bit resistant to me. And I also realized that I didn't have credit with a lot of them and I had to earn their respect. So we spoke about formation and they were very insistent that they wanted to keep their diamond. And I said, okay, I'm not going to walk in and just change the formation for the sake of it. Let's start with the diamond. We played the first game and it was horrendous. And as a coach, you're looking at it from a tactical perspective and you're like, yeah, we're being overloaded in the wide areas because everyone knows we play a diamond and now they're playing 4-4-2 and they've got overlapping fullbacks and we're being exposed. But you can't force your opinion onto people. You have to sell them a little bit. You have to educate. You have to get buy-in. So I was showing them the weaknesses. I was saying, this is what's happening and it's because of this, this and this. And they're like, okay, I went, would you want to persevere with this formation? And they're like, yes, we do. So we play the second game and we're persevering. We're 1 half in and we're losing and it's not going well. And I said, look, guys, this is where now I have to say something. We are losing this game because of our formation. Give me 1 half. Let's play the next different formation and let's do X, Y, and Z. And if you're still not happy, then we can have another discussion. And we switched the formation and we ended up winning the game. I think it was 2-1 or 3-1 maybe in the end. The centre back even scored, I think, at the end. And then I said to them, do you guys trust me now? And are you willing for me to choose the formation moving forward? And they said yes. And even though I could have forced that on them in the first game, it wouldn't have built the relationship piece because we had dialogue. and we were respectful of each other, and they felt that they had input into their team. And I think that's ultimately what set the tone for the season.
How did you come across that, giving them that freedom to stick with the formation they'd used previously, and then also at the same time being tight enough that you can kind of rein it back in and enforce your own style and approach?
Do you know, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about not judging people, and understanding that everyone's on a journey. And I just felt like the best way for a group of, let's get it, if we can describe the dynamic of the group, extremely confident, almost cocky, almost arrogant, but thankfully not, but hardworking. We're talking big egos, big self-esteem. They are not going to learn it by someone telling them something, because they need to be empowered. They will be at their best if you give them control of their lives, which is how it should be for students and for athletes. So to me, there was no other way to do it, because if I come in there and I enforce the change, what I'm doing now is I'm saying I'm going to butt heads with you, and there's 16 of them and one of me. and they are very good at what they do, and they've just won a gold medal, and they feel like they've earned the right to have an input in their team, which ultimately they had. So from my standpoint, it wasn't as if anything informed that decision. I just looked at it and I thought, this is the right thing to do, because I am stepping into their team. And I think a lot of managers don't think that way when they walk into the dressing room. They think that, okay, now it's my team. And those that think this is our team, they're the ones that are successful. So I thought, okay, right now it's their team, but I need to make it our team. So there needs to be give and take. So that's what informed that decision.
How did it feel being there, coaching, obviously back at a varsity level, but not having Jay alongside you?
Well, Jay had left before. Carlos was with me when we got the silver medal, even though Jay came to watch the final, and we made sure that Jay stood with us on the touchline, because he was part of what built that. But yeah, it was difficult not doing it with him, and we spoke about it before the final. Actually, I said that I missed working with him. But and Carlos, this is, if ever I could pass on something to people, is that just talk to each other. I was finishing one of my sessions for Norwich at the Centre of Excellence, and Carlos was up next, and he was coaching a men's team. And I was waiting to speak to a parent about one of the kids we just scouted. And while I was waiting, Carlos had started his session. And I'm watching this session, I'm thinking, my God, this guy's got energy. And I started to watch a bit more, and I thought, wow, he's knowledgeable. He's got the functional movement piece down. Like, he was doing stuff that I was taking mental notes, getting ready to use it the following week. And after I finished speaking with the parent, they were on a water break. So I walked over, I said, look, I don't want to disturb your session, but this is my phone number. Please call me, because I really like the way you coach. And he called me, and then we arranged, and he came to the school, and we sat and had a meeting and started talking about stuff. And I said, I've got to get you coaching in this school, because I've already learned more sitting with you in 20 minutes than I've learned in the last few years. And he was like, yeah, great. I'll be happy to discuss opportunities. And Jay had to leave because his work at Norwich had become so intense that he just couldn't make the sessions anymore. So Carlos came in, and again, I said to him, part of your job is to hold these kids to the highest possible standards. Don't let them get away with anything less than doing 100% in every session. And he did that, and he brought the functional movement piece, which was huge for us. He was correcting people's movement patterns. He was correcting the way they approached the ball. He was doing a lot of skills-based work, first touch work, and it made a huge difference to us. And then he obviously stayed on. So he stayed on as assistant. They got a new head coach, and his impact was with that group.
Definitely agree. Carlos is a fantastic character. Yeah. I'd love to be coached by him.
You know what? And that's the way you choose a coach, right? Would I like to be coached by them? And that's how I think I've hired across the years. It's, if I'm in a meeting or I'm watching a session, do I want this person to coach me? And if the answer is yes, I'm like, right, let's get them in.
In terms of your coaching dynamic as well, you obviously mentioned earlier with Jay that he was more so the bad cop and you was the good cop. Was it the same with Carlos? And if so, did you kind of see that as your fixed style, that you was more of the good cop rather than a bad cop?
Do you know, I used good cop, bad cop earlier just because it's a cliche that I think people can relate to easily. But I think if we analyze it properly, it was more that one of us was responsible for the pastoral care of the students because we're a school. And because I knew them well, because I see them every day in the building and around the place, and they had that relationship with me, I was more about making sure they were okay in general, not just from a football sense. It was in sense of, how are they coping with the stress at school? Are they happy? Do they need mentorship here? Do they need support here? Do they need an arm around them? Do they need me to speak to their parents? Should I call their teachers to try and get them an extension on their coursework? So I'd assumed that role because I was the best fit for it. And that left another role where it needed an external set of eyes to say, okay, in the schools environment, you might think you're doing well, but we're going to hold you to a different standard. We're going to hold you to the college environment because I firmly believe in setting the bar high for everyone. So we set the bar high, and then we needed someone that would enforce that. And I'll be the first to admit it. I had rose-tinted spectacles on because I spent so much time with these kids that I was like, oh, but he's not sprinting full speed because he's had a really tough time right now. He's just applying for colleges. He's a bit stressed out. And Jay would be the one to say, okay, that's fine, but when he's going to do something, let him do it properly. Otherwise, he shouldn't be at practice. And he enforced that mentality. And what that meant was that they had the best of both worlds. They had someone pushing them to achieve the most they could possibly achieve. And they also had someone taking care of them as people. So that's why I ended up with that dynamic. And Carlos assumed that role when he stepped in.
Let's talk about the season and how it went, which was obviously a very special one. Just give us a bit of context heading into ISSTs, how things were shaping up.
So we'd won every game going into the tournament. And our biggest challenge at the start of the year that was identified was that the only thing that would cost us winning this thing, because from a talent perspective, we were head and shoulders above everyone, the only thing that could cost us would be complacency or arrogance. And what we decided to do was to move away from thinking about the tournament. And we said, we want an improvement every single game. So we want to play one game at a time. We're not going to talk about any game that is not the next one. And we banned all talk of other games. And we kept that for the whole season, even through the tournament. Like, you were not allowed to talk about anything else. And that created a focus for us that helped us to avoid the complacency piece, because complacency sometimes creeps in if you look at your next game and you think, oh, that one's easy, but I can't wait to play the one after. And you start thinking like that, and you go onto the pitch, and for the first 5 minutes, your mind's still on the next game. It's not on the current one. And suddenly you're 1-0 down. And that shock to the system, it can be hard to recover from. And we did go 1-0 down a couple of times, and we had to sort of get the group refocused. But that was the biggest challenge. So going into the tournament, we thought, well, if we play our best and we stay focused, we should win every single game. But how do we protect against the things that could go wrong? And how do we rotate the squad to keep everyone fresh so that they could all have a meaningful part to play? They were the main considerations going into the tournament.
Just going into that tournament itself now, you mentioned it earlier, that the vast amount of matches that are played over 2 or 3 days. How did you make sure that everyone was ready to go?
As with any tournament, the planning starts on day one of the season. So we did a lot of interval work. We try to monitor fitness levels in a very crude way, as we didn't have GPS systems or heart rate monitors, but we could tell from recovery times when we did certain drills where people were at, and if we needed a top-up session to do a bit of cardio work, or if we needed to do strengthening, or we did something. So we built our whole season on preparing to play 5 games in 3 days, so everything centered around that. So from a physical preparation standpoint, it started on day one of tryouts basically. So there's nothing that you do specifically for the tournament. It's all done over a longer period. And mentally is the same. You don't introduce things in a tournament that you haven't done all year. A lesson I learned myself, I used to coach for Crofton Park Football Club, and we got to the Kent Border Cup final, which was huge for us because we were one of the lowest ranked teams. We got to the final, and I don't know what came over me, but I decided that I was going to give a big speech before the game, that everyone needed to arrive 2 hours before the game kicked off. I just changed everything for the final. We took a bus, we took a coach to the game, everyone dressed in club tracksuits. We'd never done any of that. And I did it all for the first time in the final because I thought that's how you prepare for a final. And by the time the whistle blew off, everyone was emotionally exhausted because I'd put them through a roller coaster. So we went 2-0 down in the first half. And then we went 2-2, and then we lost 3-2 in extra time. And I remember after that game thinking, oh my God, what have I done? Why the hell did I change so many things before the final, when what got us to the final is what I should have relied on? So with that lesson, went into the ASL season and had been doing that for 6-7 years, to be honest. Is your backwards plan? What's the end goal? to win the tournament. Okay, what do we need to win the tournament? We need physical capacity, we need technical capacity, we need the right culture, and we need a good work ethic. So we backwards plan it always. So when you get to a tournament, it's all the preparation's done basically. You just have to play the tournament and then do the small corrections that you need as the tournament's going on. So it might be from a morale perspective, tactic perspective, physical recovery perspective. You make tweaks, but you don't do anything big fundamentally just before a tournament.
Talk to us about that tournament then. How did it run?
They showed up. They they focused on each game. They absolutely battered everyone. And I say they because at this point, I just said that you do small tweaks during the tournament. I can't think of anything that I really had to intervene with. They were coaching themselves. They were playing. They were inclusive. They were making sure those that didn't play a particular game felt involved. Those that weren't involved were supporting, and I was enjoying the show, if you like. And we only conceded one goal, and I'll take the blame for that because I made sweeping changes, substitutions, and I think I made too many at once, and we got caught off and we conceded one goal, and that was the only goal we conceded in the tournament, and that was the coach's fault. That wasn't even the players' fault. So so it was an incredible experience. And then talking about the emotional piece, seeing the two lads that I'd worked with for so long, who had both going to travel to the States afterwards to play in America, to see them lift the trophy together and then to come and share that with me, and then to have a nice moment where the three of us sort of sat down and reminisced from when they were 12 to 13 to when they're graduating. That was my favorite moment of the whole thing. It was incredible.
The morning of the final, that was eventful, wasn't it?
Oh my word, yes.
How was you feeling?
Well, the night before, I started to get this really sharp pain in my ear, and I thought, I'll go away. It's probably just a mild infection or something. And I fell asleep, and then I woke up, and my temperature had gone through the roof. I was sweating, and you've got a fever if you touch with the palm of your hand, and the palm of your hand feels really hot. Usually you're the same temperature, so when you touch, there's not too much difference. But I remember I had to strip down to my underwear, open, and it was -3 or 4 degrees in Frankfurt.
Yeah, it was so cold, wasn't it?
So I had to open the balcony doors and sit on the balcony in my underwear trying to get my temperature down, and it wouldn't come down. And I started to feel worse, and the pain spread to my jaw as well. And I was in agony, and I called my boss, who happened to be there at the tournament supporting. I was like, someone needs to get me drugs before tomorrow's game, otherwise I'm not going to be able to coach it. I can't open my eyes from the pain. And his assistant, our office assistant, was also there, and she thankfully was more resourceful than he was, and she managed to get these really high grade anti-inflammatories. So I started popping those from breakfast, getting them into my bloodstream, because it takes a day or two of those things to really sort of work. But thankfully, whatever the pain-killing ingredient was in there it was pretty potent. So I took a dose in the morning, took a dose just before the game, and I was fine during the match. But the flight home, my word, that was that was agony. I was in so much pain.
How on earth you got through that is beyond me. But
it's that adrenaline that football gives you. It solves all your problems.
Certainly does. So the end of the season, where do you go from there?
So at various stages of my career, I had parallel careers, and I always had to pick one or the other. So initially it was coaching and the media work, and I realized that I didn't want to do the media anymore, so I went to do sports. So then it was sports admin and coaching, and then I had a decision to make when I was at Norwich whether or not I wanted to really pursue a higher position in pro football, or if I wanted to really dedicate myself to the sports admin part and be a sports director. And I chose the sports director piece. So me coming back and then coaching the varsity team, it was like the swan song, if you like. I knew that the sports admin piece was probably going to be the way forward, and that coaching was slowly coming to an end. So at the end of that season, I just thought, wow, all those years, all those clubs, it's probably done. And then, as fate would have it, 3 months later, my boss asked if I'd take the under-14s next year because we were short a coach. So I said, yeah, I'd love to. So I did one more season. I had a great time with them as well. We had an incredible season. They played some football that was worthy of a varsity team, which I was very proud of, and they're a great team, and they're the future of that program. Actually, I think they'll end up winning it for the school. And then that was my last coaching assignment. I was done, fully into education and sports.
I know you've mentioned it a couple of times about Norwich, so I feel like now's probably a good time just to touch on it a bit as we're at the end of your coaching journey so far anyway. How
Yep.
did you come across a role at Norwich, and what was that like?
Again, it goes back to what I was saying. I think one of the keys to being successful in your career is networking and relationships. I was fortunate enough that Martin helped me to get Charlton, and Charlton, I think, helped me to get Wingate, and then Wingate and Charlton together helped me to get Norwich, as well as Jay. So if you imagine, Jay and I were on the same UEFA B license course, and he went down his career and I went down my way, and then he was offered the chance to be head of London recruitment for Norwich, and they asked him if there was someone trusted that he could work with, and he put me forward. They saw the B license, they saw a little bit of relevant stuff, they saw, like I mentioned, I did Crofton Park, which was men's, it was like a high-end amateur. They saw Wingate, they saw Charlton, they saw under 18s at an international school, and they thought, okay, we can give him a shot. And all of those things only happened because of networking and relationships. You know, if I'd have applied for the Norwich City job cold, I don't think they would have even looked at my CV, to be honest with you. So that's how that came about. And that was a hell of a project. I had an incredible 2.5 years there. We did some things that I'm immensely proud of, and a few of the players that we brought in are still doing really well for the academy. So it was a good time.
Was it nerve-wracking for you to go into the sort of elite environment where you're working with players that are really at the top of their game, and you're trying to top them up that little bit more to push them onto an even further step? How was that for you?
Do you know, that's where I learned humility and to be humble, because I walked in thinking I was like hot stuff. I'm like, yeah, I've done this, I've done that, taken rep teams to play international squads, I've done this cup, that cup, I've been at cousin. The reality was that I was only big in my own little bubble. And I wasn't what I thought I was, and I got a little bit cocky and a little bit arrogant, not in the sense that I would talk down to people or do anything negative that way, but I stopped trying to develop. I stopped doing all the things that made me successful. I stopped researching sessions. I stopped watching other people coach. I stopped listening to people's opinions, which is the biggest arrogance you can have. So even if I wasn't showing a negative side to people, or face to people, I should say, inside, I had definitely got too cocky. So I showed up and coached my first session at the centre after I'd scouted a few players, and I'm wearing all the gear, and some of the big wigs from the academy are down because a couple of those boys that we identified were supposed to go up to the main academy, so they just wanted to check in on them and meet the parents. And there's me delivering my session, finished the session, thought these kids are amazing, this is great, I'm in heaven. And I got pulled to the side, and whereas I was Jay's supervisor at ASL, he was now my supervisor at Norwich, and he pulled me to the side and he said that session was not good enough. And I was like, what? He said, you did this and this, and that's not the way to coach in this environment. And one of the things he spoke about was that I talked too much. And another thing that he spoke about was that the drills were too long, there wasn't enough progression, that I was coaching things that weren't on the curriculum. And this was the first time that someone was going to hold me account to a curriculum. And I was like, yeah, but I noticed that they needed to work on this. Like, no, that's not how this works. It's all done piece by piece. And you need to do the right piece at the right time. And you need to do this, and your delivery needs to be. And another thing that he taught me at that point as well, that I'm quite a mellow person. So my delivery at that point was pretty chilled out, pretty laid back. But what that done was the arousal level for the group dropped. So they weren't really that intense. And he said, you have to drive that. Your energy is their energy. If you don't provide the energy, then where's it going to come from? And I was like, oh my God, all this stuff. And it knocked me back. It knocked my confidence, because I didn't realize that I was that bad. I was that out of my depth, because the environment's different. The expectations are different. The level of player is different. So I went away and started to do what I did that got me there in the first place. So I was online and I was watching sessions, taking notes, buying books, calling people, asking for help. Called Jay so many times saying, I've designed this session, please check it. And And then I coached for 6 weeks, and I thought I was doing much better. And then my evaluation came up, and then the head of recruitment for the whole academy came to assess my session, and he gave me feedback which wasn't great, and I hadn't got to where I thought I'd got, and I was just feeling really down actually, and I was starting to question whether I was good enough. But I kept going, kept working, and a lot of encouragement from Jay, and then I had another sort of informal assessment, and they were like, "Well done, good session." Well, it was very well planned. The kids seemed to improve as it went on, so you did a good job, and that was like a huge relief for me. So that was my experience my first year at Norwich.
That's daunting, that, isn't it?
It's because I lost sight of the things that had made me successful, and I wasn't humble anymore. I'd become cocky and arrogant in a bad way. So it was my fault.
Another experience that you've brought up with me, and I really want to sort of touch on that here, if possible, is the international squads tournament competition you was in. Yeah. So do you mind just giving us a bit of a background as to what happened there and how that went for you?
So as I mentioned earlier, I grew up playing in the Turkish community leagues because that was what our community did to stay connected to our roots. And also, if you were good enough, it meant trials in Turkey and it meant trials in Cyprus. And I never thought that I was good enough to even try that path in England, but I thought might be good enough for a semi-pro environment somewhere, because I'd come close a couple of times as I grew up, and I just thought, well, maybe if I go to another place, or maybe if Cyprus could be the way. So I'd grow up playing in that environment, but what that means is that you understand how it all works, and part of the function of that league was to pick the best 16 players from the league and take them to play games against professional teams in Turkey and the Turkish Cypriot national team. And the Turkish Cypriot national team is not FIFA recognised. So to fill their calendar, they play the rep squad once in what's called the Republic Cup game. So if you imagine the Charity Shield type of thing, this is that. So one of their big games, usually in November, and it was just before an ISST actually that I had to be at. So I went to this. So this was the thing, and they had just had the coach quit during the period that they approached me, and they were trying to find someone, and someone said, "Hey, Akay that used to play, he's coaching now. He might be someone. He seems to be young and energetic, and we can put a couple of experienced coaches with him, and we can give him a go." So they called me up. Actually, they called my dad. My dad gave me a number, and I called them, and I went for an interview, and they seemed very happy, and they gave me the job. And the job meant that I watched as many league games as possible and picked the 16, and then took that 16 and coached them for 3 months, and then we went and played this match. So if you imagine, the players are all highly invested because it's their careers on the stage. And don't forget, a lot of these players are semi-pro. So the striker was at Wingate and Finchley, the centre mid I think was at Cheshunt. So they're all like of this level, but what they'd really like to do is earn a contract in Cyprus because it's tax-free. We're talking 60,000 euros a year, which they're not going to get in England, and you're going to have a great lifestyle. So for them, this is more than just a game. This is a chance to earn a deal. So we got together, started coaching that group, and had lots of obstacles to overcome. They just wouldn't, the coaching staff just wouldn't trust me because I was young. So I was constantly butting heads. And one thing I did learn previously at other clubs is never back down, especially if you're the person responsible for that team. Don't back down. And I didn't. And I finally got ownership of all the sessions, and some of them just stopped attending. And if they did attend, they just sit on the side and watch. And I started coaching, and I thankfully managed to get the respect of the captain, Tansel, who is a great player, and he had an existing contract in Cyprus, which he was hoping to renew. And once he and I got on, he basically brought the whole dressing room round, and we became a really sort of close group. And we went over to play the tournament. And the night before the tournament, the board, who were all in the same hotel, called me down for a meeting. And I just thought it was a protocols meeting. You've got to wear this tracksuit, you've got to talk to this camera, you've got to do this, do that. And it turned out that they slid a piece of paper over to me and said, we think this should be the starting 11. And I said, I picked the team. That's my role. And if I'm not going to do that, then I'll take on another role, and one of you can coach the team tomorrow. and they told me not to be so argumentative and that I'm still young and I'm naive and I need to understand how these things work. And they were telling me that if I picked the team any other than the one that they showed me, that we were going to get absolutely destroyed. So sort of stuck to my guns a little bit. I said, it's simple for me. I'm going to pick my team, or you're going to pick your team and you're going to coach. And they said, if you lose this game, don't expect to see us around you, supporting you. This is all on your head, blah, blah, blah. They tried to really put the pressure on. But I went up to my room and I was absolutely fuming, which in hindsight was a good thing, because if I wasn't fuming, I'd be getting nervous and probably not sleeping. So I got really angry. I remember taking a shower, a really cold shower, to try and calm down. And then I went to bed. And then next morning, I called the captain over and I told him what happened, because I thought, I'm going to use this to my advantage. If they know that this group just interfered, and I also knew that on their sheet they didn't have the centre mid that I picked, and he's a really loud part of the group. Like he was a vocal person, and I told him that as well. I said, you should tell him that. I didn't even want him in the team. So I sort of like fueled them a little bit, and then in the changing room I told them again, and I said to them, look, we're here to win this. As long as you lot believe in what we're doing, I'm happy. If you don't, say it now. And they all said, no, we're in 100% in. And set the team up, went 2-0 down. And it's approaching half time, and I'm getting all the daggers from the stand, from the board. The players are starting to get frustrated. And I just thought, oh God, how has this happened? So we went into the changing room. We were all talking in the changing room, and I made a couple of tweaks. And I spoke to the captain and I said, you're not really like understanding the weaknesses that they've got. Like, you keep playing to their strengths. That one of their centre halves, he wasn't the quickest and he wasn't that mobile. And I said, you've got to play on him. You've got to play on him. So he went and played on him, and then suddenly it was 2-1 early in the second half, and it's all us. And we're playing really, really well. But throughout this whole process, when I was coaching, I kept getting criticised by the board for doing set pieces. So I used to do 20 minutes of set piece at the end of every session, mainly attacking. And I had a corner set up, which was a read and react style, which meant that whatever the opposition did, we did something to counter it. So it wasn't fixed. So an opposition team could never really set themselves against it. And I just kept telling them, keep doing the corner. And with about 10, 15 minutes to go from a corner, exactly how we set up, we get a goal. And now it's 2-2, and there's a few minutes left, and we get another corner, and I'm yelling at them, I'm going, do the corner. And they did it. I think their goalie saved it, dropped out, someone finished it off, and we ended up going 3-2. And then I just dropped everyone back into a low block. And I was like, there's no need for anything other than that ball to be in the corner of the attacking corner. We've got a minute left. There's no need for anything else. And we did that. We won the game. Everyone went absolutely crazy. And it's funny how the board then took full ownership of me. They were like giving interviews saying, yeah, this is our guy, and all this stuff. And we went out that night. I remember it was a bit worse for wear in the morning. I had to take the flight back, and cameras were at Stansted Airport waiting to interview me from London Turkish TV. And I was hungover trying to get an interview with my dad waiting to pick me up from the airport. So yeah, so that was that experience. Awesome. It was crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I still got the video of the match and everything. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Oh wow. Okay. Cool. What I was gonna say is I'm seeing a really unfortunate trend of nights before finals.
It might be my good luck thing, right? Because we won both.
There you go.
Got gold in both.
I was actually going to ask you whether you saw the team, and clearly you did. I know it's a principle thing, but I know some people may have just refused and just ripped it up and just sort of said, I'm not listening to your team, or I'm not looking at your team. Did that ever cross your mind, or was you just interested to see what they thought?
I'm not really the type that goes into those types of confrontation. I'm pretty calm, and I just felt like, all right, this is your organisation, so you have the right to remove me if you want to remove me. I'm not here to beg for a job. So I just held that position. If I do it, I pick the team. If you want to pick the team, you do it. And I think that's what frustrated them ultimately. I think they wanted an argument because, that was what they were expecting, and they didn't get it, and they realised that I wasn't going to back down. It might have caught them a little bit off guard, but yeah, if they'd have sat me down and said, hey, we've got some feedback for the team. Here's how we see it. What do you think? We could have had a discussion. You know what? They might have even swayed me. But to outright tell me what the team should be and to insist that I pick it, because they'd obviously been meeting for weeks and getting worried and panicked that this, whatever age I was at that time, I was early 30s. You know, this inexperienced young coach, whatever, is he going to be able to do this? I think they had a panic attack, and whereas the rest of us were all calm and focused on what we're doing, I think they let that get to them a little bit, and they thought that this was the way to fix it.
What an experience that was.
I mean, recently they got back in touch, some of the squad, and we were reminiscing. It's so nice to have those types of memories, and I always say to coaches as well that I work with that, like, medals are great. Don't get me wrong, I love hanging them up and having them to remember things by, but you know, it's if you don't spend time investing in the relationships and the people that you work with, those memories aren't as good. The emotions that you feel when people call you and they say, "Hey, do you remember this?" and you know, we enjoyed this, and wasn't it great when that happened? That's the bit that's really important.
I know we've been speaking about Last Dance,
yeah,
amazing documentary. I mean, you've highlighted two amazing, I guess, finals, which there was medals on the line, but I'm sure the memories from those live on and mean probably more to you than bit of medal.
I've lost far more finals than I've won, and it's funny. It's not even about the finals. You know, the teams you remember are the ones that you seriously went on a journey with, and you connected with. And it just so happens we spoke about the ones we won because they were sort of had some interesting subplots as well. But the first ever JV tournament, that was like the first proper structured team where I was coaching a team 3-4 days a week. We lost that, but I remember all those kids. I could name off that whole squad, and some of them out of the blue sometimes drop a message on LinkedIn or an email or something, and all those memories come flooding back. And they made me this great poster of pictures of our season. I've still got it sort of framed and hung up. So we do focus on winning a lot, and winning is nice. And anyone that says they don't enjoy winning, I don't believe them. But if you only focus on that, the wins are too few to sustain any sort of passion for anything. You've got to have the passion for the process, because we just spoke about 2 wins, and I can maybe add 2 more big ones. And I'm turning 39. I've been coaching since I was 18, 19. So in 20 years, if I only had 4 or 5 of these big wins, you know, to keep me going, it's not enough. You've got to enjoy the process. You've got to enjoy the relationships. Otherwise, don't bother, I reckon.
We spoke a lot, and I'm very wary of time, but I've just got a few more questions if you don't mind.
No, go for it. Got plenty of time. Go for it.
So when you got into coaching, and probably the early years of you coaching, did you have a role model? And if so, who were they, and why was they your role model?
So when I was growing up, Arrigo Sacchi was like the man. He was a tactical genius, but there wasn't the resources or readily available resources to allow you to tap into what he was doing. So you had to watch his teams, like his Juventus team and so on and so forth, to sort of get an understanding. But as a novice, it was hard, but he was kind of a hero just because he was Arrigo Sacchi. But Guus Hiddink for me was probably one of the first that I started to follow, because I remember someone telling me he was a PE teacher before he was a football coach, and I thought, oh, there is a chance for someone that didn't play to coach. So I started to follow him a bit. But I think the first 2 actually that had real impact on me was Louis van Gaal, and that Ajax team that won the Champions League with teenagers, and the book that I bought based on that, which explained the 3-4-3 that they played. I learned more then about tactics than I did probably for the next 5 or 6 years until I went to Charlton. So that was a huge impact. And then Mourinho, someone who didn't really play, was an interpreter at a football club. And at that point, I think it was when his Porto team was doing well in the UEFA, I think it was, that he started to you heard little things about him. And then they won the Champions League, and then everyone was talking about him. And I was just hungry for Mourinho material, whoever I could speak to. Have you got anything? And he moved to Chelsea, and one of the coaches at the academy leaked out his Bible, and it was doing the rounds, and I managed to hunt it down, and I saw the level of detail that goes into planning for the squad. And we found the odd, scout report that he'd done and all these things. And he became someone that I sort of modeled myself on, just because, people talk about Mourinho now and they just see the negativity, but you need to understand that this was a guy that was coaching with underdog teams, and he found ways to beat the biggest clubs. and he was structuring clubs. He was one of the first to sort of affect culture of the group. And there's an excerpt in one of his books where he talks about walking into the Porto room. And no, not the Porto. It was his club before, which I've just gone completely blank on. And he told them in that dressing room, he said, this club isn't where I'm going to end up. I'm going to be at the biggest club in the world one day. And if you want to go on that journey with me, then you have to give me everything now. And I promise to take some of you with me. And that's the first example that I saw of culture setting, where he created a group of we're in this together, if that makes sense. So he had a huge impact on me. So I would say that Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho, even though Jose Mourinho in the last 7 or 8 years, maybe not so much, but how he started and how he built his career, huge influence.
Now, obviously, you've worked with a lot of coaches and you've seen a lot of coaches, and obviously you've got Louis van Gaal and Jose Mourinho as sort of role models there. What would you say is qualities, if you had to sort of narrow it down to maybe 1 or 2 key qualities that a coach needed to be successful?
It's funny because the ones that I would think that a coach needs to be successful are probably the ones that Louis van Gaal and Mourinho don't have, which is causing them to suffer in the modern game. I think society has changed and relationships are far more important now than probably they were when those guys were at their peak. Back then, it's a coach-centered approach. I command, you do. And I think that's changed now. So I would say that now you need patience for sure. You need to be patient with the group of people you're working with. They're not going to get it straight away. That's at every level. Empathy to understand what they're feeling and understand their process. Put yourself in their shoes. If you're capable of doing that, you can really tap into a person. Strong communication skills across the board now. We're talking media, we're talking on the training pitch, we're talking with directors at the club. You need to be able to clearly articulate what it is that you're trying to do, because if you can't, you could lose key stakeholders. Finally, obviously, knowledge. Now it's accessible to all. So this is the one that there's no excuse for now. You can go on LinkedIn and you can find the coach and you can go and watch a session. You can buy all the materials. You can pay the subscription fees for coaching courses. You can take courses. You don't have to take courses in England. You can travel the world and take courses. So there's no excuse for not having the knowledge box. So I would say, what was it? Patience, empathy, communication, and knowledge are the 4 that if you have those, you've got a chance.
Looking back at your coaching journey, what would you say is your standout memory, your favourite memory?
Do you know, having spoken to you now about all of those things, I'd say it changes, and it changes based on the time of my life. Like right now, I think, because I've drawn a line under my ASL experience, and it is, you never say never, but it's highly unlikely that there'll be something for me to return for or to, that suddenly that winning the ISST with those boys has gone back to number 1, if that makes sense, because I'm obviously in a reflective mood about my time there, and I miss those guys, and now they're off in the States playing, and sometimes I worry about them with everything that's going on over there. But I think that has kind of maybe taken the top spot. I'd say that my experience in Cyprus playing against the Cypriot national team was incredible. Something we haven't spoken about, when I was at Crofton Park, we won the league 2 years in a row with a team of just friends and ex-players from random places that we sort of threw together, and we set this team up, and we had great success. So they're all really good memories. I think when I'm in different times of my life, that different ones come to the fore. So right now, definitely ASL, ISST, gold, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned about Crofton Park. How long was you there for at Crofton Park?
So I found it hard to get coaching jobs, so I decided to create one. So I formed a club in 2007, and it was a men's team, and I just advertised for players and managed to get a sponsor to hire a pitch for us, and then charge subs for refs. In the first year, we were terrible. we lost our first ever game, I think like 12-0 or something, because a lot of the local sort of big clubs like Eltham Town, like Greenwich Borough, they put their reserves or their third teams into this league. So we were getting absolutely smashed. We were really struggling. So it took a while to build it up. So that went from 2007 till, I think I did 5 years there. So yeah, it ran for a while. It was just once a week training, once a week game, so it wasn't too demanding, and I usually fit it in around all my other stuff. But great memories there as well.
You've obviously mentioned it, but would you ever consider a return back to coaching?
So, if you asked me 2 weeks ago, I said 100% no. But as I'm planning for my future in Amsterdam, I'm trying to work out like what clubs to support and where to go, and because I always use football as my social connector as well to make friends and meet people. And I found this great club. They're proudly sort of anti-racist, and they put a lot of work into that piece. And they used to be in the top division back in the day, but now they're semi-pro. And they've run all sorts of age groups. They've got a real community feel to it. And suddenly a part of me, I got that little twinge, if you like, that could be cool to coach in that environment. So yeah, like I said 2 weeks ago, I would have said never. Now I'm starting to think maybe there's a chance once I settle into my role that I might take on a little twice a week gig somewhere.
If you had any piece of advice to give to young coaches or a coach who's maybe a little bit inexperienced listening in, and they want to develop, they want to kind of follow in your footsteps that you've done so far, have you got any sort of words of wisdom?
Firstly, you can aim a lot higher than me. I had a lot of fun in football, but I definitely could have pushed and got a bit higher if I wanted to go down that route. But so the first thing I'd say is set the bar high on yourself and ask yourself if you really want it. If you're going to do something, you've got to be all in. And that's anything in life. That's not just football coaching. You've got to be all in. And to be all in, you've got to make sure you can answer that question is, do I want to sacrifice for that? And if you don't, then I would say don't even start on the journey. You've got to want to put it in. And I'm talking about if you want to be a pro coach and, earn your living through it. So that would be my first thing. And the second thing is it's all about people. Meet people. Meet as many people as you can that are in the game, that are around the game, that understand the game, talk, share ideas, share experiences. I wish someone had told me that when I was 19 instead of me taking 10, 15 years to work that out, because it would have accelerated everything. If I'd have met my Martin Hackett when I was 20 instead of my mid-20s, I would have had my Charlton opportunity sooner, which means I would have taken my B license sooner, which means I would have, been able to knock on a few more doors sooner. And with this career, it's all about time, and you have to put the time in. So the sooner you can put the time in, the quicker you get to where you want to go. But you need the relationships, and don't get cocky like I did. You have to realize all the hard work that you put in to get you to a certain place, that needs to continue, because it's the same for players. You've seen really high-end footballers go off to a club and it just doesn't work for them. Sometimes it's because they think they've made it, and that can happen to coaches as well. And it kind of happened to me, even though I wasn't even at that higher level. I somehow thought that I'd made it, and I stopped doing all the right things, and it set me back. So that would be my main thing, and enjoy it. If you're not enjoying it, don't do it. Don't force yourself into a career. You've got to make sure it fills you with excitement to show up on that pitch, because the kids, they're more important. Sadly, for coaches, the kids are far more important than you are. And if you're not invested and you're not positive, that's not fair on them. And you can't do that to a group of young people that are trying to establish their passion for something.
Yeah, great takeaway there. Penultimate question. If we sat down all of your players that you've worked with, got them all into one big room, what do you think they would say is your best attribute in terms of coaching?
They'd all say different things, but I think the one thing, well, I guess I really hope the one thing that they would say is that I was kind and caring. I want that to be the one thing that everyone takes away, is that I help and I support, and that I'm thoughtful and empathetic, because that's important to me. Because if they feel that means that I've been able to help, and that would mean a lot to me. So I think they'd all say different strengths, but hopefully a character trait, that would be the one that came up from all of them.
And final question, where are you off to now? What's your next steps?
So I'm off to Amsterdam University of Applied Sciences. So I love coaching, but now I'm moving to coaching university students to prepare for life and their chosen profession. So I'm going to be overseeing the coaching program, and I'll be coordinating all the coaches that work with the students. I'll also be lecturing on sports development, hopefully also coaching on diversity and integration. So lecturing on those things. And yeah, It's something exciting, and I also running a consultancy to do similar work for other people if they need it. The Revolve Sport, and it launched 6 months ago, and unfortunately we only have to hold our events because of the COVID situation. So we're hopeful of holding a few events in November, December time, depending on how everything goes.
Okay, brilliant. That brings us to the end of today's show. So Akay, how can anyone listening in follow you or Revolve Sport on social media?
Yeah, so at Revolve Sport is our Twitter handle, and that's a great way to get in touch with me or with some of the partners that we work with. I'm also on LinkedIn, just as my name, Akay Mustafa, and I'll pop up, and you can check for Revolve Sport American School in the CV to see if it's the right one. And they're the best ways to reach me.
Brilliant. And the Revolve Sport website?
Yep, that's www.revolvesport.com. That's also there. It's got all the contact details listed as well.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Akay.
Thank you.
You can, of course, follow Halftime Cuppa on Twitter using our handle at halftime, all one word, and then _Cuppa. And, of course, my personal account is at DannyCook1996. As mentioned at the start of the show, all of the previous episodes are available for you to catch up on our website, halftimecuppa.com, our Spotify, YouTube, and iTunes. Just by searching Halftime Cuppa, you'll find us on there somewhere. Thanks again, Akay. Really appreciate your words of wisdom and your really interesting story. So thank you for that, Akay.
Thank you. Been a pleasure.
Not a problem. Until next time, stay safe and goodbye.